Well, thank you all so very much for joining us today. To prove that we are human, we were meant to have a third speaker, and alas, he's come down with a stomachache. Doesn't happen with AI, so draw your own conclusions from that one. But so, hope Jack feels better. But so, in the meantime, I guess we will riff it a little bit, and perhaps I may speak a little bit more in that case to provide a more balanced kind of view and the like. So maybe by way of brief introduction, my name is Brian Tang. I lead LITE Lab here at Hong Kong U, and I'm also co-chair of LITE, the Asia Pacific Legal Innovation Technology Association, which allows me to have a broader perspective of the developments across the region. Thank you very much, Ben, for collaborating on this. It's great, and we should be doing more of it. I thought I'd start up with a couple of introductory slides. Some should be quite familiar. So this is the famous Goldman Sachs slide, which when it first came out showed that 44% of all tasks, right, will be, can be replaced by automation. And this compares with a lot of other areas. And of course, this doesn't just impact law, but also knowledge workers writ whole. A less well-known slide within the same presentation actually is this one. Which I often share, where they talk about which countries or jurisdictions will be most impacted. Hong Kong ranks highest, right? So in fact, given the nature of our economy, this makes it all the more important that we are conscious of this, and Hong Kong takes a leadership role in relation to trying to address the evolution and impact of AI. So it's been a busy couple of months, and I wanted to share some introductory slides to give a lot of you context. Here, today's topic is in relation to the Lawtech startup ecosystem in Hong Kong, and we'll touch upon that from a startup founder's perspective and the like. But here, globally, this is what's happened. So last month, Harvey, for those that don't know, Harvey is one of the well-known Lawtech, law AI startups. And if you also don't know, the name came from Suits, the show, right? So Harvey raised $300 million in Series D from Sequoia. There's been an interesting analysis that based on a revenue multiple perspective, Harvey is valued higher than OpenAI, right? And why is that? How is that possible? Right? And the analysis is on the right-hand side, because Harvey famously charges US $1,200 per seat per year. So per seat means per lawyer. That's why they're trying to target large law firms. And you compare with some of the other kind of legal AIs that have different pricing models, right? So of course, this then impacts different parts of the legal ecosystem. If you're a large firm versus medium firm versus small firm, and what are the benefits, pros and cons in relation to some of this. Now, February has been a tremendous month also in relation to assessing legal AI. So beginning of the month, Linklaters published its second English law benchmark. So what does that mean? So this is the second time they've published this. And the first time they published it, AI failed, okay? They used the openly available GenAI, so they use GPT and they use Gemini or Bard in the first round. This was last year, the year before. This is the second time, and it passed, right? So it's getting better. Now here, they were specifically using these generally available LLMs, but applying it specifically to legal use cases, and specifically English law use cases. Hence, they called it, the English law benchmark, done by a very English law firm, right? So this came in the beginning of February. Then came the VAL's AI report. So if none of you are familiar with this, this is the one that you should all be reading, right? So an independent organization that's looking at evaluations actually did an analysis of Thomson Reuters, VLEX, Harvey, and Vecflow. Apparently, LexisNexis also did participate, but withdrew from the final publication. And you can see the benchmarking that they did in relation to different use cases that are known to be general use cases done by lawyers. What's the summary? Harvey and co-counsel came up tops in a lot of the categories, right? And that helps with the valuation as well, I'm sure, with some of these companies. But remember, so what I was told was the studies were done in December of last year. and every month the models are improving. So snapshot at that stage, things are moving slowly and surely and faster, right? So so that was the first big report. I think they just issued some commentary yesterday, so this is very fast moving as legal professionals are actually genuinely assessing which platforms are better at what and why and the like. So then came another report. This was by a handful of academics. Daniel Schwartz from Michigan, whom I actually met when I was over in Chicago, he compared two platforms. And he used students actually as the assessors. They used Vincent AI and OpenAI O1 Preview. These are the 5 questions that they got the students to actually assess the platforms on. And so, and hopefully as you see some of the questions, as the lawyers in the audience, you hopefully will resonate. It's like, okay, I see that. I can see some use cases there and the like, right? So this is what their study came up, and very provocatively and nicely titled, I thought, AI lawyering, right? So how do we use AI as part of our lawyering? Vincent is known as a RAG model, so a retrieval augmented generation model. Whereas OpenAI O1 is one of the new reasoning type models, where it goes recursively in terms of asking the questions again and again. So if you do prompt engineering, you have to ask a question and you do a chain of thought as you frame your prompt. This does it internally, built in, and that's why it takes like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes for it to do, but it's because it's actually recursively doing it, and by the way, burning a lot of tokens at the same time that they're actually using it. So they were comparing the two kinds of approaches there. And then, not to be outdone, this just came out a couple of weeks ago. And I thought this is actually one of the most relevant to audiences here in Hong Kong, and in fact, most of the rest of the world. So this came from the Nevada bar. So like in most jurisdictions around the world, the vast majority of lawyers are small and medium law firms, right? So can they afford the Harveys of the world? Will they be offered access to that? And so they created an assessment using various criteria, which I list there, and again, happy to share some of the links here in relation to these as well. But very importantly, for those, so how many of you are practicing lawyers in law firms? Yep. So one of the key things is when you actually introduce a new technology, how much does it cost, right? How much does it cost? So it's nice if it's fantastic and really great, but again, the newest OpenAI model that's being introduced, 20,000 US per month. Now, some people say, oh my God, is that worth it? No way, right? But if you think about how much you pay a junior associate a month, and maybe if it's the quality not of a junior associate, but ostensibly a PhD level, which maybe let's call it mid-level associate, or maybe a junior partner, is 20,000 a month worthwhile? Right, again, different business models, different approaches. So in this one, very interestingly, they have new models here that a lot of you may not be familiar with, right? Whether it's ClearBrief and Luminance were added to Vincent, ChatGPT, and Anthropic's Claude as well. So those happen to be the ones that they assessed, and then they graded and the like. My purpose here today is not to sell or say one is better than the other, but to share with you, at least in the broader legal fraternity, there's much more rigor being applied to the different kinds of LLMs that are coming out, and for different use cases and different price points. So ultimately, it's about the different users to decide what they want to do and what makes most sense. So one of my little side hobbies these days is actually to use GenAI to create images that I post on LinkedIn, right? So the left-hand side one was the image that I posted in relation to, what I call the battle of legal AIs, right? All of a sudden, you had all these reports, right, that I just showed you, all of different legal AIs, and this is all in the month of February. So what is the right tool for your firm? What is the right tool for your legal department? And now there are different analyses coming out, some more transparent than others in terms of replicability of studies. But then I just posted this morning, this one on the right-hand side. So for those who are following GenAI, we had what's called a DeepSeek moment, right, a month ago, nearly 2 months ago now. That's when DeepSeek was introduced in open source and very famously from China. And so suddenly, for developers and startups, wow, I can do an open source model now. I can create my own. It's much easier. It's faster, right? And then last week, a new platform called Manus AI came out, again from China. And Manus AI is meant to be agentic, right? So rather than a traditional chatbot, which is how we're kind of used to using the AI tools, you can actually ask the question, and then it goes on and actually does things, and it actually can code itself. It can create a website. It maybe can review not just holiday suggestions, but book it for you and the like. So there was a comment made by Ethan Mollock, who's quite a famous commentator, this morning. He called it, it looks like mainly a Claude wrapper. So the phrase wrapper used to be a little bit derogatory. It used to be like, this is the hardcore LLM, and they're just adding a wrapper on top of it, and then they're selling it like that. But actually, there's another analysis around that. If LLMs are getting commoditized, if there's so many of these LLMs, and they're open source ones, could it be actually application level? Could it actually be the new UI UX that is a competitive advantage here, right? And that may or may not explain the valuations of companies like Harvey in the legal space, where it's very high value added if somebody cracks the solution there. So with that kind of background, that was meant to be a brief introduction to a couple of Hong Kong startups here that we have. I've been involved in the legal tech space for a little while, and startups are hard, and legal techs are kind of harder sometimes, right? If you're doing a B2B sale and you're trying to sell to a law firm who's very conservative, right? So are they willing and able to, what are they willing and able to make decisions in that light? So fast forward, so as we shared, alas, one of our startup founders is unfortunately unable to join us, but we're very lucky here to have Ron. So welcome, Ron. Please welcome Ron to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe, Ron, let me start the ball rolling. So the way I was going to structure today was as follows. I was going to ask the startup founders a couple of questions. I might be a pretend Jack a little bit just to give a counterpoint. But hopefully we'll have another chance for him to share more directly. And then I was going to give some time for each of the startup founders to do a brief demo in relation to their tool. What I found is that so I do a lot of work in fintech. And in fintech and regtech, often they would talk about their solutions, but they all sound the same. Right? You see their brochures, they all sound the same. So it's nothing like actually seeing the demo for yourself, and then you make up your own minds and right? So maybe if you can briefly introduce yourself there, Ron, and including, are you from the law or are you from the tech side?
Okay, I'm Ron, and I have a startup called Makebell, and Makebell is an AI agent startup for legal tech. Am I from the law side? Well, I do teach classes in law, so I guess that makes me from the law side. I do have a technical degree, so I guess that also makes me from the technical side, so I guess I'm schizophrenic.
No, thank you. So I always assume you did start with a law degree, yes?
I started with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering.
Okay, so did you have a law degree at all?
No, I thought about getting a law degree, and I said, I have to read all these cases. No, I'm not going to do that.
Fair enough. So the reason why I asked, I've known you for a long time, but I always assumed that you did have that background, because the other founder, Jack, is a pure technology person. He started from crypto, right? And he built stuff on blockchains type stuff, and then he came across, then came GenAI, so then he's creating GenAI solutions. Then he came across the law. So my point about this, and we see this in fintech as well, people who start from the fin side, or people who start from the tech side, and then they come in and they merge there. So why and how did you start with this law tech journey?
Well, actually, I was always interested in law, but I actually got my law degree when I was a bit later in life. My background, aside from the mechanical engineering degree is actually in IT. So I had worked in IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Wang Laboratories, and FedEx in the IT space. So, and during that time, I actually had some interest in AI. Now, AI, when I was starting out, was quite different than what it is now. It was mostly, for those of you who are familiar with the history, it was mostly expert systems, perhaps a little bit of fuzzy logic, and there was also the robotics element as well. I did get to do some robotics work. When I was at IBM, we were actually working on a system for manufacturing protocols for local area networks, so there was also a lot of robotics involved with that as well.
So that's from the advisory side, that's from working in companies, but what started in the entrepreneurial law tech space?
Well, actually, I have to thank you for that. The history is of our company is that the founders all met at a hackathon organized by Brian over here. A couple of years back, we got together and we formed this group. And at the time, we weren't quite sure whether we'd go into law tech or not. We were very much all interested in AI in some form. And we kind of started playing with AI, seeing what we could do with it. But in the end, we gravitated back towards legal because that all three of us were lawyers or legally trained. So we realized that was actually our core strength, rather than trying to get into certain areas that we weren't particularly good at.
Thanks, Ron. So real story, I didn't know that part until very recently. So by way of my own background, I came from big law. I was at Mallesons in Australia, then Sullivan & Cromwell in New York, and then in-house at Credit Suisse, so big law and big bank. And then I left to go into startup land, into fintech and regtech. And how I came back into the law was when I learned about this thing called Global Legal Hackathon. I said, finally, lawyers going to hack, right? Going to work on technology. Who's going to organize it in Hong Kong? Nobody was. So I said, look, if somebody will underwrite it, I'll do it. So Thomson Reuters agreed to underwrite it, and so I organized Hong Kong's first legal hackathon. This was held at Thomson Reuters, so much thanks to them. And our top team in Hong Kong made it the finals in New York, and they won. So it's actually on the back of that Hong Kong U tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, will you come and lead a new initiative here in Hong Kong U? So that's that part of my story. But it was only recently when prepping for this, and we had a pre-call, and we had one of, I think your third founder join. I said, his name is Hadrian, right?
It's Cadrian.
Cadrian,
yeah.
Which is a very unusual name. And I was like, I know that name from somewhere. Where do I know that name? And that was when I realized all three founders met at that hackathon. I did not know that story until really recently.
Actually, what happened was I was the first one. I met Cadrian. And then the second day, I actually dragged my other co-founder. I literally dragged him. Ian, you can double check. Kenneth will confirm that with you. I literally dragged him out of his house.
Right.
And yeah, that's how we got together.
Fantastic. So now that you've got this, so just to position for everybody, this is 2018, 2018, right? So quite, in GenAI terms, it's like 3 decades ago, right? Before GenAI even came about. So when you were first looking at the technologies, it was not AI. Well, it was classical AI potentially, right? Yeah.
Well, actually, it was more machine learning than anything else. And we actually had a lot of ambitious plans. The problem was that the technology was not quite there yet. And with those of you who are familiar with machine learning development, you realize that there's quite a lot of training, there's quite a lot of time, and there's quite a lot of money involved. And then when the transformer models came out and ChatGPT, all of a sudden things that were not quite possible suddenly became possible, and then with the time frames that were very, very attractive.
Yeah, so again, I think that's right. So I call November 20th World Synthetic Data Day, because that was the day that ChatGPT was launched, and with all the new stuff that's generated, there's all this, what they now call AI goop, and then they post it on the internet, and then the new models are actually training on that goop, right? So on that synthetic data, if you think about it, right? So now fast forward in the latest incarnation of what you have created here. So who's your user persona? What problems are you trying to solve?
Well, actually, we started to work on agentic AI before it became a thing because we realized that a lot of processes need to be automated. And you actually have to put these processes together and combine them with the generative AI to actually make, make certain actual productivity improvements beyond, for example, drafting contracts or drawing pictures.
Okay, so maybe we'll take that as a nice segue for you to share a brief demo of what you currently have. Sure. As I let you set up. So because, alas, Jack is not here, we have a little bit more time and leeway in terms of how we structure today. And the hope and intent is after seeing the demo, I will ask a few more questions, and then I please want to open up to the floor for you all to ask questions of Ron and or me in relation to today's topic. Over to you, Ron.
Sure. So we were developing agentic AI systems, and these will run on local or cloud servers. Now, part of the reason we offered the local is because we had to deal with, for example, a lot of conservative lawyers who were very, very much concerned with legal privilege, and they wanted, full control of the data. So we did offer them both a cloud-based as well as a local option. Now, one of the things we have done to show you the power is to show a demonstration of the completion of a long-form document. Now, this actually happens to run on a somebody's computer, so I can't actually show it to you here. But let me just go through this. This is with a private placement memorandum, which is often a 100-page document, prior to the launch of a financial instrument. Now, the PPMs are quite long and complicated, and most places, law firms and even some financial firms have their own templates. And so what happened is when they're doing this in the past, it would be done manually, which meant they had to fill in the forms, the blank spaces manually, but they also had to delete sections which were not relevant. What we have done here is we've actually provided a questionnaire. They fill out the questionnaire, and it will automatically fill out the form. And it will also automatically remove irrelevant sections. So, for example, you're doing a private placement in Hong Kong only, and it will remove, let's say, the sections relating to London, New York, etc., in the template. Now, the other things that we have done include a case bundle, a system to manage case bundles. So what it does is it helps barristers, for example, litigation solicitors, deal with a lot of documents. And it will actually ask questions. It will take these documents, it can summarize them, create timelines. It will ask them questions like, for example, what remedies are being sought. Now, in this particular demo, we've actually used a subset of the Google versus United States litigation that's currently ongoing. So it will answer questions about the remedies being sought. It can also answer questions about the complaint as well as the amended complaint, among other things. The other things that it will do, we will also help with indexing, so that and it can also perform queries. So in case somebody was brought this to court and they wanted to double check a witness statement, they could use this to double check the witness statement as if they were using Google or some other search engine. The system itself can run on the cloud, but it's also for purposes of legal privilege, it also can run on a localized server, so that is air-gapped from the internet. Now, the other demonstration here is for a system to assist with the commercialization of patents. Now, what happened is that a lot of the universities and other organizations have patents they would like to have, commercialized. So what this system does is it will let you query against, let's say, a university's patent database. So you say, I'm interested in 6G technology, for example, and it will bring up potential matches. It will also provide summaries of these inventions and patents, as well as a relevance score and how relevant they are to your inquiry. Now, from there, you can select a particular patent, and it will reveal the patent to you. Okay, so it brings it up. It will also provide you with a summary if you like, and you have certain questions. For example, what does this thing do? What problems does it solve? It will also help you with listing out the components. It will identify the areas of technology that this is involved with. And it also can provide you with a list of potential licensees. So this helps with commercialization. Now, the system itself that we've shown here is actually capable of much more. It is capable of taking for example, somebody's research paper and creating an information disclosure form for example, a law firm or lawyer to write a patent with. It can actually also draft a patent, which is what we usually don't tell lawyers, right? But no, just not to scare them away. But actually, no, I'm just kidding about that. There are other things that it is capable of doing. We've added a few other, we're working on a few other features to assist with office actions and other tools to assist with the facilitate the process of getting a patent. The office action is when you get a patent, when you apply for a patent, and the examiner will look at the patent and say, I don't like this thing, and he'll reply with what is called an office action. And we actually have built a system to help analyze and formulate replies for the office action as well. Okay, oops, I think we've gone back to the start.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for that. So again, I wanted a kind of demo so that you can actually see what the UI UX is like. I don't know whether it's real time or you had fast forwarded the response time.
Oh no, this was real time.
Okay, no, just checking. It is a shame that Jack can't be with us, because then you can see a different UI UX and how they're presenting it. So ironically, I first met with you and Jack when you were both presenting at the Asia Financial Forum, and because of my work at FinTech. But what struck me was I think you were the two legal techs at that venue. So maybe if you can share a little bit. So I believe Jack's platform is kind of more all ready to go, shall we say, right? And so people can actually interact and use it. Whereas your model is a little bit more a still consultancy type model. You're creating bespoke solutions.
We are more on the bespoke solution. Yeah, you're correct.
Okay, great. And it's interesting, your first example was on PPMs, because David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, has actually publicly stated that he thinks 95% of prospectuses can be drafted by AI. And given how much IPOs are a big deal for Hong Kong, a lot of law firms I think might want to pay attention to that. So what's under hood here? So what kind of LLMs are you using? What data? Okay,
the data is it can be a combination of client-specific data, or it will also be the data that the models have been trained with. We are somewhat platform agnostic, so we offered initially a choice of the models, and this was because each model we found had specific strengths in certain areas. So when we're putting the agents together, we would actually match different models. So the agent itself would be heterogeneous in the type of background technology. We have more recently upgraded the models to have DeepSeek R1, for example. People can choose whatever model they want, and if they prefer a particular model for whatever reason, we will, easily just, tell them, okay, fine, we'll just take out, Claude and we'll put it, DeepSeek or whatever.
So in my LITE Lab class, I get my students to create chatbots on Poe. And for those that know Poe, you can actually choose which model that you want to use, and then I get them to compare it and the like. So for your clients, are they sophisticated enough to say, like, can you check it using DeepSeek R1 versus check it versus Claude? Or are you like, this is my secret recipe, kernel secret recipe, this is what I think is best for your solution?
Let me answer the question slightly differently, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One of the things that has happened over the past few months is that the expectations of people have grown considerably, particularly after the launch of DeepSeek. The quality that people are demanding is much higher, and the sophistication of the modeling is also much higher. And I would also point, since I do teach classes in IP and patent law, I have actually seen the quality of students' papers go up. I have no problem with students using AI, by the way, because I expect them to. But I have also noticed that as well. And I do understand that people will be quite naturally benchmarking us against a lot of models. I'm sure that the other providers are also being benchmarked against general models as well.
Okay, so, no, great, and we can talk about the students part and where the teacher hat later on. But as a law tech, so again, you've seen some of these evaluations. I don't know whether you've had the chance to look at some of them and what your thoughts were. Because ultimately, it seems like the right direction, because people will say, Ron, okay, this looks great, but is it correct? Is it a good answer, right? How do you respond to that?
I think when you look at the benchmarks are good for models that are doing very specific contained tasks, which have fairly definite answers. I think in most cases, legal answers are ambiguous at best. This is why we have litigation and mediation and arbitration. So I think whether the answer is good or not, it really depends on the lawyer. And I also point out that some of the answers nowadays require analysis by different lawyers in different fields, and the answers may not be necessarily all legal. For example, let's talk about, I hate to go back to intellectual property, let's talk about know-how, okay, because know-how is an important part of protecting the IP in an agentic AI. It's actually kind of difficult to protect just with IP laws for various reasons I won't get into. So if you have an agentic AI, one of the things you want to protect, if secrecy is a big deal, is access to the model. And so how do you do that? Well, you can't rely on IP law. You actually have to rely on cybersecurity, which is a completely different animal. Okay, so as a result, and answers that might have been fairly simple once a long time ago, like how do I protect the copyright of my painting? When you get into agentic AI, they become extremely complicated and multidimensional.
Okay, so is it a different way of saying it depends?
It's a long way of saying it.
Good lawyering there. So let me pause briefly. I want to open it up to the floor for anyone who has questions for Ron and myself in relation to what he's doing, his platform, and the ecosystem. Because otherwise, I can always go forward. Yes, please, yes.
From from what I know, law is a very strict and very logical work field. And as we all know, the AI have hallucination like while generating the content. Like, how do you ameliorate that?
There are many techniques to ameliorate, mitigate the hallucinations. They aren't completely, you can't completely eliminate them, but you can mitigate the effects. One way, of course, is with a RAG model to do external checking. The other ways to do it are to have multiple models check the answer. So it's a bit like, but you know, if you think about it, it's like, let's say you're grading a student paper, the students can make mistakes, and then sometimes, you know, maybe you want a second opinion, so you ask a second evaluator to go through it. So it's the same general principle, except that the evaluators, instead of being human, are now AI.
My brief response to that is that's why I do believe at the current stage of the technology, there are certain use cases that are more apparent and better than others. The phrase hallucination was in some way a genius. Normally we'd call it like inaccurate, right? Or it would be inconsistent, because you could ask the same question at different times, you might have something else, right? And that for a lot of us may be unacceptable, right? But the other analogy I give, especially for the more senior lawyers, is this. You have a really great associate and you have a very mediocre associate. You love working with a great associate because you have less to mark. You check it and you're more confident it's that. You don't like working with a not great associate because there's a lot more work to do. You need to check it more. So that's where we are right now, and really it's up to you to check. There's interesting studies around who is the optimal user of these. Some people say that you have to be a domain expert to know whether it actually is a good answer, right? Because if you're not an expert, you're like, looks good to me, right? So there are certain stakes questions and the like, but I think what Ron was referring to is some of the reasoning models where basically they're checking internally, they're checking themselves. So that helps reduce it, but of course doesn't eliminate it.
The other thing that can be done in some cases is to actually improve the prompt. So some people have gone through a lot of prompts and then prompt re-engineering and prompt refinement. So that is another possible solution to the problem. My colleague in this area, he is a big fan of this solution. So he actually believes very strongly that it is a lot of problems with hallucination can be eliminated at the prompt stage.
Which can be, so this one can get controversial too, because it can be at the user level. We had a lunch recently where somebody said, oh, I have a full page to my prompt. And like, really? That's how long it takes to draft? So I said, it's kind of like a magic spell. You bring out your grimoire and you have the right spell, right? Sam Altman in the past had said, if you all have to do long prompts, I'm doing this wrong. So there are different approaches to that. So what people are doing is building those prompts into the context. So when you do the simple thing, it triggers the longer prompt internally. So that's how they're trying to deal with that. Thank you very much for the question. Anyone else? Yes. Sorry, on the right? Then yes, thank you. Ladies first.
Thank you so much for showing us the demo. I guess I have two questions. The first is on the use of generative AI, and specifically for the first case you mentioned with the PPM. So what exactly are the specific advantages of using generative AI in a RAG model versus, let's say, a rule-based system? Because for document automation, there are other companies out there like Joseph. They're not necessarily using generative AI, and yes, it might take more time to build the actual rule-based model for it, but ultimately the accuracy might be slightly higher than, for example, using GenAI. So yes, that's my first question. And the second question is to do specifically with Makebell and the provision of both local-based servers and also cloud-based servers. I'm curious to know which is actually the more popular option, because obviously confidentiality is a huge concern, and I'm just curious, like, why you provide both, and whether it's like the case is actually like most people prefer local over cloud, and like what's the situation? Yeah, thank you.
Very good questions. Let me answer the first question. With regards to the rule-based versus generative AI allows for faster development and deployment, much faster. And it also allows for a degree of flexibility you don't have with a rule-based system. Okay, if you do the traditional rule-based system, it will be very much tied to a particular document, and once you change the document, then things you have to be rewritten and retested. So that's the major advantage of. Furthermore, in terms of the accuracy, we actually provide the draft, and we tell the person involved, which is usually the lawyer, please review this, okay? Because you know, in case there is a problem. The second question with regards to local versus cloud, it's mostly cloud. Now the the reason people want local is because they have certain information that cannot go outside their circle or their environment, okay? So that's the one thing. The problem, however, with cloud is that you have to actually maintain the system. This is actually much more complicated than it might sound, because when you have to maintain, you know, do the normal maintenance that you have in an IT system, which is, you know, upgrading it, you know, making sure that everything runs properly, you know, doing the cybersecurity thing. But you also have to ensure that the models are also updated as well. Okay, so that's also a problem, and it's something people may not be aware of. Now, in terms of cloud-based solutions, you have outsourced a lot of the operational maintenance to a provider such as AWS or Tencent Cloud or whomever.
Great, and maybe if I can add a little bit to that. So as those in my class would know, I'm a big fan. I started with no-code, low-code automation like Joseph and Checkbox and Power Automate and the like. And over the last few years have transitioned so that students experience more about the GenAI elements. So I think there is a space for each, but as Ron said, look, if it's a matter of, let's say, filling up a will, so okay, this is where the names go, this is where the assets go, then it's quite determinative. If it's something that you're actually drafting about a company and what the company does, and it's more descriptive, then that's where GenAI, there benefits along those lines. On the second question, I shared this little anecdote. I was actually invited by deacons at their in-house forum last year, and the question was posed to all the in-houses, what is their main concern regarding adoption of GenAI? And it was confidentiality, right? So how do we solve that? And on the same panel was somebody from Microsoft, and I joked with Fred, you're not doing a good job, right? Because they're still concerned if they're worried about Microsoft, you know, right? So obviously, I think that is still a concern for corporates that have, for their law firms that have, you know, privileged, confidential, so that's the most valuable thing that they have in the system, right? For corporates, all their contracts, right? So this is a big hurdle, at least mentally, for a lot of the stakeholders. I think, again, I came from finance. It took the banks a long time to actually go on cloud. Slowly but surely they're doing that. So I think that's the journey that I think law firms and like need to do as well to get comfortable that the cybersecurity requirements are there for them. But you know, there are other concerns and like as well.
If I might add something to that, with regards to confidentiality, the other reason why some people prefer an open source model that's air-gapped from the rest of the internet is because they are actually afraid that some of their data might get leaked to, let's say, OpenAI, for example. And so this way, if it's completely air-gapped and there's no interaction with the larger systems, this is not a concern, okay? Otherwise, if they're going to use a cloud-based system that uses an open model, then they would have to have some kind of mechanism to redact certain sensitive information. And that can be done that can be done with with AI. In fact, we've actually done that, but it's not 100% foolproof.
Thank you. There was another question there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for sharing your platform. Just wondering, are you worried about AGI? Because, well, I suppose it's not just a legal tech provider, but all lawyers should be worried about AGI. Right now, if you go to DeepSeek and ask them about a question about Hong Kong law, it's actually pretty good already. Obviously, it's probably getting like 80 to 90% right, but obviously you have to have the domain knowledge to tell what is incorrect in that in the advice, right? But as you know, AI improves and it gets close to AGI, would all these add-on legal services that's offered by legal tech, would they be redundant, or could people just use the general commercial AI to do all the legal work? Well, it's not just for AI platform. I suppose all lawyers should be worried about that. Yeah.
AGI has been around for a couple of years, by the way. There was actually a guy, Ben Gersel, who was in Hong Kong. He was doing this at least 8 years ago in Hong Kong. So it's actually not that new an idea, just for everybody's information. It's to answer your question, I think one of the problems that all the AI providers face, especially with the startups, is the possibility of getting Sherlock, where somebody comes up with a technology and basically destroys your business model overnight. I think in our case, we actually have thought about that, and we actually do believe that it is ultimately the domain knowledge that helps you with this, and that's why we actually move towards agentic AI, because there's a lot more domain knowledge that you can inject into that versus, let's say, a DALL-E, which is draw pictures. There's not much you can do aside from clever prompt engineering to influence that. But yes, that's actually a good question. Sorry.
No, so maybe if Grace, you can put back my slides. So I think your question is twofold. I mean, I think when you meant AGI, you mean like, oh, the supercomputer AGI. Is that what you meant? So there are two elements. One is that question, and the second question I think is related. Yeah, this one. That's fine. So it's related to the if you're going to have a general, like say, so if you just use a general DeepSeek or general ChatGPT, which if you have VPN, then it's free and all that, right? Is that better than a dedicated one with the database and a RAG system? I think the jury's still kind of out on that, to be honest, right? Those that have the data will say, yes, it's better. And again, we'll need to do tests to see which one is better. But the interesting thing was there have been studies where sometimes the general model is actually better than the RAG model. So then like that logically doesn't make sense. Shouldn't the domain expert know more, right? So I think there are ongoing tests in relation to that. On the broader AGI question, I was actually in Paris in the lead up to the Paris AI Summit at an AI safety conference, and there are various people that are concerned about that, but in the current environment, after I left Paris to come back to Hong Kong, that's when J.D. Vance came in and said, go, 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 right? So it is an arms race now, so for better, for worse. So I think some countries are still looking towards, rightfully so, in terms of protections and safeguards and guardrails and technical safety standards. We don't have an AI safety institute here in Hong Kong, but there are other countries that do have that. I think that, so for those that are concerned about that, they are working through that, including using technical safety standards. But right now, everybody's speeding ahead. There was a question up front. Thank you. Behind it, then here. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for the discussions today. I've learned so much. I want to ask a question based on the Hong Kong ecosystem for law tech startups, because reflecting on everything that's been covered today, I wonder how easy it is for Lawtech in Hong Kong to get funding? And secondly, in terms of the Lawtech developed in Hong Kong, how easy it is for it to break into like other jurisdictions. The reason for my questions is because coming from a small firm background, I practice in Australia and I come from a small firm background. When I look at selecting Lawtech, there are a few very important considerations. One being how easy it is to customize this, the Lawtech, and also how easy it is to integrate with other things I might be using. And thirdly would be obviously the price. And in my experience, comparing with all the products that are available for lawyers, especially in Australia, I find that sometimes it's very hard to choose something that's from a smaller law tech company. So anyway, that's why I'm asking this question. Thank you.
We mostly funded ourselves, so we didn't have to. But so from a funding standpoint, Lawtech, shall we say, wasn't exactly high on the list of a lot of people in the startup community a year and a half ago. I think more recently it's become easier for a startup to get funding in this area. So that's to answer your first question. To answer your second question, if you actually, because of the internet, the availability of data, if you actually have people who are smart enough to know how to use this data, know where to get this data, and use the generative AI, you find that you can actually have people who are doing fairly good work outside your immediate jurisdiction. For example, we actually had somebody who had asked us to show us how you could analyze an Australian contract and identify potential areas of risk from a safety standpoint, from a potential litigation standpoint. And we did that. And they were kind of surprised that us in Hong Kong could do that. All right. Also, in terms of the case bundle system, despite, with due respect to the legal texts in the UK, with respect to that, when we showed it to some barristers in the UK, they were gobsmacked because nobody in the UK had actually even thought about trying to do this, something this ambitious.
Great, and wonderful question. Thank you, especially given the topic. A couple of things. So I've been involved that, I organized Hong Kong's first legal hackathon. So on the back of that, we've had, I've seen some legal techs come and go. Welcome to startup land, right? Because it's hard to get traction. I do quite a bit of work with Invest Hong Kong and Cyberport in the fintech space. So fintech's high up, and then, Web3 now is high up. Legal tech, I actually pinged them in the lead up to this, say, hey, have you guys added it on yet? Not quite, right? So it still hasn't gone, but there is increasing interest in it. A couple of examples of that, including the Legal Week finally did introduce AI and legal tech into the agenda, and now the Department of Justice has set up a law tech consultation group, of which maybe because I complain a lot or talk a lot, I've been invited to join. So I hope that it is a sign of things to come. Let me add a couple of last points to that. Number one of the reasons why I'm very involved in LITE, the Asia Pacific Legal Innovation Technology Association, is because, as you hinted at, in Asia, we're also kind of cheap. We don't pay the US rates, okay? We don't pay that amount that the US firms and law departments are willing to pay. So we need local solutions, right? And that's where through LITE, if we can find local solutions, that's fantastic because it tends to be locally priced, whether it's in Hong Kong or whether it's in India, right, where there are lots of great developers and great solutions in common law, right? So there are lots of, or in Australia, actually, right? So there are lots of possibilities across the region. And Singapore is very, very progressive in relation to this. The last point I would add is, in theory, it should be great in Hong Kong. So I had lunch yesterday with a colleague, and he said, yeah, I heard about this law school team that actually created an NLP to help with workers' compensation. I said, yeah, those are my students, right? So there are people, and then they actually created a startup in Science Park, right, and were funded. But they no longer exist. But it's one of those things, right? Startups are hard. So the benefit that Hong Kong has is we have Hong Kong Lee. So for those that don't know, all of Hong Kong's law is publicly available. So if you got an LLM, you can train it. Whereas if you go to other jurisdictions, you can't actually find the law to train your LLM on. So I think that is actually one benefit of Hong Kong and the startup scene. But thanks so very much for the question. So we're going to gather the 2 questions now, and then we're going to take them. And then if you want to stay on, please do. But I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Ron, for the session so far. I have a question specifically about the patent section of the AI. A lot of patents are drafted with a lot of legalese, very broad language to cover possible applications down the road. I was interested that you said that your solution can actually come up with a list of the problems that a technology can solve, and even go as far as a list of licensees. My question is, how good is it? And the second question is, can it go as far as doing a patent valuation?
Sorry, let's take the second question as well. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your sharing. This is Leo. I'm from a small and medium firm. And my sharing first is about my humble opinion, like from my past 10 years of practice. I think local law firms or like small, medium firms, the bosses, they are not too much concerned about efficiency. They kind of care much about the billing and also the profits. So my question is, first of all, could you does your model have any jurisdictional constraint? For example, does it apply to Hong Kong laws only, and then Hong Kong drafting, or like American drafting? So it would help to kind of boost the efficiency. And the second question is about your target. Are you targeting firms, the bosses, or individual? Thank you.
Let me answer your question first, Leo, because it's a little bit less complicated. So, okay. From a jurisdictional standpoint, it depends on what data we put in. It can be multiple jurisdictions, global. As I mentioned before, we actually provided a demonstration of an Australian jurisdiction. So yeah, it can be done. In terms of targets, there'll be law firms, as well as technology transfer offices, but there are also, to be frank, I think a lot of smaller law firms could really benefit from something like what we offer. Now, to answer your question about the patent problems, actually, we had originally started with a summarization of the patent, and they wanted a problem solution, and they also wanted some kind of indication of what kinds of firms would be interested in commercialization. So there is a general commercialization. But if you look at the list, okay, let's say it comes up with, who would be interested in, licensing this technology, it says Stellantis. Well, that means if a Stellantis would be interested, that means Toyota might be interested, Volkswagen might be interested, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of valuation, that's actually difficult topic. I think one of my students over there will tell you I spend a whole class teaching about actually not 2 classes about valuation now. Patent valuation is an extremely difficult area to deal with. One, because you have to map 3 different variables concurrently. One is on the technical side. You have to map also against the legal side as well as the business side. Let me explain. If you have a patent for a technology, the value of the technology and the value of the patent depends on the cycle. So if you give a patent for, let's say, 4G technology, it's going to be less valuable than maybe 5G or 6G technology. from a legal standpoint, if the patent has become invalidated, it obviously becomes worthless. Okay, so that's the legal standpoint. From a business standpoint, it also depends on how well the patent is managed by its owner. So if the owner actually knows how to manage the patent and find commercialization partners, that means its value will be greater relative to somebody who doesn't know what to do with the technology. So, so those are very hard to map. Plus the fact you also have different kinds of mapping and valuation protocols, cost method, income method, and most people do not understand how to apply those, and therefore it's extremely complicated. To be frank, I've been playing with that valuation model for a long time. That was actually my my LLM master's thesis, was valuation. So I have some idea how difficult this is.
You struck a chord with him. You see the trauma coming out from that? But let me finish off, and thank you for your patience. We're running over a little bit with this point, because I think that last question hit to the core of this, right? So I'll share this anecdote from my LITE Lab. When I created it, I knocked at the law firm's doors to say, hey, would you like to work with students on legal tech? Not much interest. And my friends who are partners at law firms at that time were saying, Brian, we charge by the hour. Why do we want to save time, right? Fast forward, right? So then that's when I spoke to in-houses. In-houses need to do more with less. And they were very receptive, and we were lucky to work with little companies like HSBC and FedEx and McKinsey and their in-house teams to actually work on these tools. Fast forward now, I think with GenAI, that the provocation with small SME firms, and that's a really important question, is this. What is their value add? So to me, a lot of the use cases that are often touted relate to research. I personally don't think that's the first use case you should go for, right? Because that's where you have the hallucination problems, the inconsistency problems, and then people, it's useless. I'm not going to use it, right? You find the use cases that actually have lower risk, really boring tasks that lawyers have to do. And by the way, once you do it and you automate it, cool, I can do value-added stuff, right? And then you also then build on business models where increasingly is charging by the hour the best way to do it? Because I used to do IPOs. So I used to be quite popular because my minimum, bill that I write is $1 million US, right? But if the law firm gets that, if they can manage their time well, that's profit, right? So is that going to change the business model? And it also serves well the partners from SMEs who are entrepreneurial. Listen, I can get more business, but I only have so many, I don't want to hire too many associates because, sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not. But if I can actually use AI to scale, right, at a fixed cost, right, maybe there are benefits. So I think that's a provocation for how the legal ecosystem can and will change, the profession will change. I want to thank you all for coming here today. Please.
Sorry, can I add something to that? I agree completely with Brian, but I also point out that in doing legal tech, you also have to have technical competence, because doing these large models, for example, with doing the long documents, there's a very real possibility that the models will hallucinate very, very badly once you get beyond a certain number of pages. So you also have to have a certain amount of technical competence to know when these models might start to break down and how to mitigate that problem. So
yeah, but the problem with that is if I'm like a 50-something-year-old head of my small firm, why do I want to learn this, right? I mean, the law is complicated and evolving enough, so I don't want to have to learn that stuff. I want to make it as simple as possible. Can I just plug and play, right? So I think that's the challenge for the law profession.
That's why you call people like us.
Okay. Anyway, could you please put your hands together and thank Ron so very much, and thank you very much for being here. We'll be around if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your engagement and your great questions today. Thank you.